I'm with David Hayward, the Naked Pastor, who it's tough to even look at the camera at right now because I'm such a fan. So I'm gonna behave myself. I promise. So David, I know who you are and you know who you are, but just to give anybody listening
Mhm.
a brief history, and I'm terrible with dates, so I'm likely to screw some of this up. But what I know of your story is that you were a pastor for about 30 years.
Mhm.
Um, and came out of Gordon Conwell Seminary,
Yeah.
studied under Gordon Fee, which for those who, because this isn't a theology podcast, so for those poor writers who aren't theology nerds, they're like, I don't care who Gordon Fee is. He's a big deal. So
Yeah.
studied under Gordon Fee, and then started blogging around 2004, 2005.
Yep.
Is that right? As the Naked Pastor? I think I
Yep.
encountered your blog sometime around 2007 was when I
Oh,
started
okay.
reading your work.
Wow.
And then you left ministry and left the pastorate in 2009.
10.
10. Okay,
Mhm.
2010. Um, yeah, and I just want to apologize to any of my listeners who are listening. Y'all know that I'm, have this weird history in church world. And I know a lot of y'all are like, I don't understand it when you say things like left the ministry. That means like the ministry is an all-consuming job that like brings identity in a lot of ways to who you are. So leaving
Mm.
it isn't like, leaving working at the post office.
Right.
It's a life consuming thing. I think David, recently you said in an Instagram post, it's like losing a limb, which
Yeah.
is kind of how it feels. It's like, oh, I'm going to
Yeah.
cut my right arm off and now like go through life without it.
Yeah.
Um, and then so you left the ministry in 2010, and now, since then, and now you produce these amazing works of art, um,
Thank you.
that are, just absolutely beautiful. You have a whole series on a woman you call Sophia, which I want to talk about a little bit,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
where the kind of philosophical backing comes from.
Mhm.
And then you also produce these brilliant cartoons that are New Yorker style, one panel, intent to bring levity and at the same time provoke thought, uh,
Mm.
which is really beautiful. Was there anything in kind of your history or introduction that I missed, or?
No, it's pretty good. You comparing my cartoons to the New Yorker, that's a huge compliment because that's my gold standard.
Oh, nice, good.
Yeah,
I'm glad.
yeah.
Yeah,
They're the best. But
yeah,
I might add, I'm been married to Lisa now for 42 years, and we have three grown kids, all
yeah.
in their 30s. But no, that's well done.
I
Well
don't think
done.
so. And you have a book about kind of walking through marriage and
Yeah.
uh leaving church, kind of that, like, but I would actually put the book at like not just leaving church but like traveling through difficult times as a married couple.
Yeah.
That's a
Till
great
doubt
book.
do its part when
Yeah,
changing beliefs change your marriage. Yeah.
yeah, it's really good. And you've written 5 books, is that right?
10.
10. Oh man, I'm behind. 10 books. That's awesome. Yeah, and I wish I had a copy sitting next to me. I just bought Flip It Like This, which is your new cartoon collection. I actually
Yeah.
bought one for me and then I bought 5 to give away to friends.
Oh, cool. Cool.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so it's fantastic if
Thanks.
anybody wants. I think what I love about it is your cartoons aren't just ones that you can read once. Like you read them and then I come back to them over and over again, and I feel like they continue to have depth of meaning,
Hmm.
which is
Hmm.
I
That's
think
great.
yeah, true art. Okay, so that's enough of me. That's enough of me fanboying around you. I'd love to talk a little bit about kind of rewinding in your time, that transition you made from going to ministry to kind of full-time art. Would
Yeah.
you mind talking to us a little bit about that and what that was like, what it felt like?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. The uh, the big deal. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on your show, and
Oh
it's
no,
great
thanks
to
for
be
coming.
here.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, and I didn't tell you, so this is a podcast for authors, for writers. We do a lot of like craft work, Part of the reason I wanted to have you on is because I know so many people in our community are thinking about or pondering their art, are like struggling with like, what does it mean
Mhm.
to be a writer, to be a storyteller, to be this kind of like artist in the world?
Yeah,
Some of them are struggling with like, hey, should I be doing this full time? Should I not? And then I know a lot of us are struggling with, myself included, how do we take this pain of our past and
yeah,
process it
yeah,
in
yeah,
a helpful way for the world?
yeah.
So, yeah. So thank you for giving us
So
time.
yeah, mostly authors, you would say?
Yeah, almost the entire. We're a fiction writing community.
Oh, cool.
A lot
Oh,
of
man.
memoirists too. Yeah.
Wow. That's one of my aspirations, actually. The books I've written are, well, except for Sophia, I suppose. Um, my books are mostly like nonfiction. But Sophia is kind of where there's a series of images that I drew of the
Hmm.
woman, and each one has a reflection. So that's not really uh, nonfiction. It's kind of poetic prose, kind of reflective
Yeah.
kind of thing. But I would love to be able to write um, a fiction um, around an idea. So that's something that really appeals to me, and I really want to do. There's been some, short fictions that have had a real impact on me that I would love to figure out how to do.
Nice.
And the interesting thing is, like, I do read some fiction, but I find most of the books I end up reading are nonfiction.
Mm,
But I especially love biographies. So I just
yeah.
finished um, Isaacson's biography of Einstein,
Oh, nice.
which I found fascinating.
Yeah, that's a big one
Um,
too. That's like a
that's a big
chunker.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but fascinating read. Yeah, so my transition from ministry, which is a very, um, on the one hand, quite cerebral because I'm constantly studying and reading and writing and preaching, teaching. On the other hand, it's a very social kind of job too, where you're constantly dealing with people. And then to make the leap into what I do now, which is basically make art, was quite a scary transition. Excuse me, I gotta sneeze.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Do you edit these afterwards?
Not usually, but I will
Okay,
if you want me
all
to.
right, sorry.
Yeah. No,
Okay, it
take
went
your
away.
time. That everybody who watches and listens to this is used to me being totally messy. Typically my
Okay.
hair isn't even combed. I combed my hair today just for you. So
Just for me.
yeah.
Um, and but the thing is, I've been painting and drawing my whole life. Like, I grew up in a home where my dad was a painter, and although he was a full-time cop, but he was a painter, and so I just learned to draw early and paint. And when I was in ministry, I would sell some art, but I was constantly making it. But it was around 2006 where I decided, I really like a good cartoon, like the New Yorker style cartoon. There was another cartoonist I was following at the time, well, still do, Gaping Void,
Mm.
that it inspired me to try to just do cartoons. I thought one day, why don't I try to draw a cartoon, see what happens? And I did, and I posted it, and I found more people were following me on my blog, and
Mm.
uh, the cartoon has, like a one panel cartoon has a pretty quick impact. You don't have to read 1,000 words. They say a picture's worth 1,000 words, but I found more people come into my blog. They might not stay long because it only takes a split second to see the cartoon, but yeah. So I challenged myself to do one a day, and um, I thought I'd last a month maybe, but here I am 17 years later, still doing cartoons almost every day.
How does it
And
feel? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
yeah,
I'll hold my question for a minute. Yeah.
so I had thousands, literally thousands of cartoons in my arsenal that I had to choose from for my new book, Flip It Like This. They wanted about 125 best of cartoons, and man, that was really,
That
really
sounds
hard to do.
impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. How does it feel to so this is sorry, I'm gonna go off this questions I sent you. If you don't want to answer it, just be like, I don't know how to answer that, Jeff. Um, it strikes me that you've been living in a brand. for kind of 17 years.
Mhm.
Um, and I know a lot of artists who get kind of in a brand get tired of it. I think we have a bad inclination of like flipping out of those brands really fast. We're like, oh, I'm done with this one. I need to start a new one.
Yeah.
What's it like to kind of live in that skin for 17 years?
Yeah, that's something I've one of my primary drives in needs is my personal freedom. I want to be completely free to be my authentic self,
Mm,
and that's what I encourage for others as well. So I found when I was in the ministry and in the church, it got to the point where I no longer felt I had that freedom,
mm,
and that's why I left. And then you're right. I sort of started this. I had already started this NakedPastor
mm,
uh, brand. I didn't mean for it or think it would or intend for it to turn into a brand, but it did, to the point now where you're right. There's sometimes I'm thinking, oh, I'm not so crazy about that name anymore, and it's like, well, gee, thousands and thousands and thousands of people are following you, and that's nobody knows David Hayward. They only know NakedPastor, so it's kind of like I'm stuck with it. But I don't. One of the um, qualities or values of NakedPastor is that I'm all over the place,
mm,
so I don't feel hemmed in at all. And although I do like the challenge of drawing a good cartoon, I think I'll be a cartoonist my whole life.
mm,
And but I'm also known for my writing and speaking and videos and
mhm.
paintings and everything. It all comes out of the same thing. So uh, I understand, though, an artist's um, you know concern about being trapped in a kind of a style or whatever.
Yeah,
That to me would be a nightmare.
yeah. I
Yeah.
think part of what I love about this public voice that you have in the Naked Pastor is that part of the part of I hate the word brand, but part of the brand beautifully encapsulates your vulnerability and
Mm.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
the exploration. Like I think as I've followed you over the years,
Hmm.
watching you explore different topics and like seeing you grow in different areas,
Yeah.
the idea of vulnerability being your brand is a really beautiful
Yeah.
thing.
Thanks. Yeah, so that's the whole point of the word naked
Mhm.
pastor is it. I wanted people to see behind the curtain of what it was really like to be a pastor and what really goes on in the church. And so yeah, it's all about vulnerability, openness, honesty, transparency,
Mm,
you know,
mhm.
and no pretense. So that hopefully comes through in my art and my writing and so on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear a little bit about, coming out of that place of ministry. I'm sure your art cost you.
Mhm.
Because I know the church world and I watched you go through this a little bit from afar. I know that they like things clean and
Yeah,
like
yeah.
easy to cover, in the formula. Would you mind talking a little bit about, putting that art into the world that challenged a world that didn't want to be challenged?
Mhm.
What was that like for you as an artist?
Yeah, so I think, like I said a moment ago, my I think my number one concern is my own freedom, personal freedom, and to be my authentic self. So I uh I try to help others do the same, and I you know as a result, I'm helping people who are transitioning out of constricting, oppressive, limiting kind of um, environments, whether it's marriages or families or jobs or religion or whatever, so that they can become their own authentic self. Feel free to do that. So you're right. Like that's one of the things that often got me in trouble in the church and was essentially the reason why I eventually left,
Mm,
was because I was, my freedom of expression and expressing myself through yeah, my writings, but my cartoons were the ones that got most of the attention. And so I was expressing my ideas freely through my cartoons.
Mm.
Sometimes I naively thought, oh, people are going to find this funny. And then realizing, maybe not.
Yeah.
Some people didn't find it funny, including the church or the denomination that I worked for.
Yeah.
And so um, that eventually was what caused me to leave, just so that I could continue being myself and expressing myself freely.
Yeah.
And, it's not, that doesn't just happen to people who are leaving the church or religion or whatever. It happens to people who are leaving maybe their assigned identity, or their family or their culture or their job or whatever. There's all kinds of people out there uh, who know the risk of being themselves and expressing themselves, uh, and that is the risk of rejection, right?
Mhm.
So uh, I have a lot of empathy for artists and writers and so on who are trying to express themselves freely and openly and honestly in ways that will you know benefit others, and many of them know the risk. I know a lot of writers who have and artists who have suffered great loss because of their just expressing themselves and being themselves.
Yeah, I think it's I love that you're tying that exiting of the ministry, exiting of like religious life, not necessarily religious life is, let's say, like the institutional religious life,
Right,
to
right.
that that like comparing it to that exiting of any place in the world that like places these expectations upon you and is forcing you to kind of live under these expectations,
Hmm.
when internally you know that there's like this true expression of yourself that would defy those expectations,
Hmm.
and looking to find freedom in that. I think part of what your art does in a r- really profound way is give people permission to explore, how those expectations have laid on them and have
Hmm.
like created for them a personal identity that they aren't comfortable in and doesn't necessarily feel right to them.
Right.
As somebody who had that identity, who was like always a little out of place in the institutional church world, I remember encountering your work, first, originally your blog, uh,
Right.
back when they had Google Feed and you can just like
Yeah,
get them
yeah,
to
yeah.
come up. Yeah, I feel very old. But yeah, and encounter your blog and just having the permission to be like, oh, David is taking these very courageous steps out of expectations. And that gave
Hmm.
me permission to take courageous steps as well.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah.
That's
Less boldly and more meekly and probably not as heroically as you did, but still giving me the permission to like move in that direction.
Well,
Uh,
it was kind of an accident. Like when I started blogging, nobody was reading my blog really. But when I started blogging, I was like, I called my blog churchpundit.com. And it's kind of, that sounds really pretentious. But I came up with the name kind of accidentally, Naked Pastor, I and that was my intention, just to be really honest.
mm,
And uh, you know, people were attracted to that, and like you say, they felt affirmed, encouraged, validated,
yeah.
that hey, I'm not alone here, and I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
This is actually a thing. And so that was really cool, and things really haven't changed. Like I started like back in 2005 or 6. Um, but even to this day, like when you um, watch, like if you're on Instagram or TikTok or anywhere like that, they're all saying what people want is authenticity. You got to be yourself. And they're like, man, they're still saying that 17 years later.
At some point,
And
we'll actually start being
think
ourselves.
young,
Yeah.
Yeah, these young, influencers are on TikTok, why just let people into your life and let them see how you're really living. Just be your authentic self. That's what people really are drawn to. And I'm like, hey man, been there, done that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I'll keep doing it. And that's, that should be an encouragement to the writers out there that if there's a way that you can really just get yourself on the page, honestly, uh, and authentically, that's what people are really drawn to.
Yeah. So there's two questions that come out of that that
Uh-huh.
I want to probe you with. I'll go the like more structured one first, and then I'll go to the
Hmm.
second one. So your art was encouraging and transforming and empowering for me at the same time as somebody who's in a position of power, who was like um participating in negative systems that created negative impacts in the world, right? Like that's who I was. Like I was working for a church. That church, I was working for churches. It's not just one, but I was working for churches, and in my position as a pastor was encouraging negativity into the world, right? Like, I am the villain in the story at a lot of times.
Hmm.
And I found your work incredibly challenging as
Hmm.
well, like just pushing on me to be like, hey, what you're doing in the world has a negative, and sometimes my reaction to your blogs or your work was not always positive, right? Like
Right.
I can remember like reading your blogs. Like I remember specifically reading one about waterfalls and like a vision you had of
Right.
like, thought coming together and like spirituality coming together, and just I wasn't ready for that at the time. And
I
I was
wasn't either. That was one of the most epic, as they say out there, one of the most epic moments of my life.
really,
That in 2000, 2009.
yeah.
Yeah. That was a huge epiphany for me.
Huh.
Yeah, that was very, very big. And
Yeah.
that, I wasn't ready for it either. Although, I'd because I was in religion, spirituality, I was very interested in how all this all fit together.
Hmm.
I couldn't make sense of how is Christianity exclusively right when you have all these other realities in the world, and
Yeah. It
I
feels
couldn't.
so good though, David. It feels so good to be
Yeah,
exclusively
so
right.
I was in angst,
Mm,
let's call it spiritual or religious angst,
yeah.
for many years, like decades. And then one day, it was in the middle of the afternoon. I just sort of saw this picture. It was nothing weird, or wasn't a vision or anything like that. But I just saw this picture in my mind of a waterfall, and it I from my angle, I couldn't see what was above the waterfall, where all the water was coming from. I could see all the water coming over the rim of the waterfall, and then the water spreading out over the earth.
Mm,
And to me, that symbolized the invisible, the made visible, and the application of the made visible. So, and I saw everybody has their own angle on that. Christianity, it's God who is invisible. Christ makes God visible. The Spirit spreads it out throughout the earth. The Buddhists might have theirs with nirvana, then the Buddha, and then the community, the Sangha, the community. Atheists might have their perspective of the undiscovered, the discovered, and the application of the discovered, and so on and so forth. And so to
yeah.
me, it was like mind blowing that um, we're all united at a deep and fundamental level. There's only one reality, but we all have our different ways of uh, um, um, viewing it,
Mm,
and uh, you know, absorbing that reality, explaining that reality. We have our own words, we have our own paradigms, et cetera, et cetera. So to me, immediately, I felt peace of mind. It's never gone away. It was huge that there's one reality. We all have our own perspective on it, on our own way of describing it, including Christianity, including Judaism, including Islam, including Buddhism, Hinduism, atheism, you name it. You go on down, science. It's all one reality with all these different perspectives. And so that blew my mind. And I started naively sharing that on my blog, thinking, this is great. I have the peace of mind I've always wanted, and I want others to feel the same. And, it was within a year, I was sort of compelled
Yeah,
to
because
lead the ministry. So
assholes like me were like, too far, David. Well,
I don't remember you saying that, but
I
uh,
didn't say it to you.
but I know it did upset people, because everybody wants their brand to be right, exclusively right. So
Well, and
or their
I don't want
religion.
anybody to miss part of what I deeply appreciate and love about you, and what I've learned from you is that there's this deep courage in allowing yourself to have that type of exploration.
Hmm.
Because to be clear, like, I resonate very much with your story. I also grew up in a like Christian home and was raised in a specific worldview. And while my parents were very open, that worldview was dominant. I, went to seminary and was educated in that worldview and invested myself for years in
Yeah.
that worldview. And my identity very much came around the protection of and propagation of this worldview.
Mm.
And so I find it incredibly courageous for you to be able to allow yourself to even explore those kind of ideas outside of that worldview. There's so many of us that are and were terrified
Hmm.
of allowing that kind of experimental thought. So I think,
Yeah.
yeah, even if somebody just listened to you and was like, oh, that's too much, or that's too far, that's too, take away, my hope is that they will take away, like I did, the like, man, how um wonderful is it to allow yourself to challenge your own views and to look
Hmm.
in your own. Um, how did you handle, because I imagine you get 1,000 comments a day that are negative and that are pushing back.
Yeah.
Some of them from people that are like in deep self-protection, some of them from people like me that just, weren't ready or aren't ready.
Hmm.
How do you manage that, like personally as an artist? How do you manage that kind of pushback on your work?
The thing that I always want to do when I'm making my art or whatever is that I'm just expressing myself. So in my writing, I'm sort of exercising my own demons, exorcising, not exercising. I'm sort of getting my stuff out there, getting my ideas out there, my cartoons, my art, whatever, because I'm just compelled to express myself,
Mm,
and like I'm overflowing with expression. I just want to express myself. So that's the number one
mhm,
thing. If I do it because I'm trying to sell something, or my art, or sell a book, or I'm just trying to influence or whatever, that for me pollutes what I'm actually doing.
mm,
So I just always keep that first and foremost, is that I'm expressing myself. And I always try to make that clear on my blog. Naked Pastor was here. I'm not trying to change your mind or anything, but this is what I'm thinking, and take it or leave it, right? This is just me. It's like an online diary, my
mm,
personal log.
yeah,
That's basically what blogs were meant to be in
yeah.
the beginning. And So when people criticize my stuff, which happens every day, like you said, uh, I'm just reminded of one I got today, of one of my videos. They're like, "This is how stupid some criticism is," and I can laugh at this, where they say, "You must be gay because you look really weird." Like, what? How many, you know how many things are wrong with that? Like,
How do you
and,
even start
or
to
I'll
look
say,
away?
I'll just get a comment. I got another one today, dumb, or whatever. Or so
Oh
my
man.
5-year-old can draw better than that, or
Mm,
on my cartoons. And I'm constantly getting criticism also that I'm a heretic, or I'm going to hell, I'm going to burn
mm,
forever, or whatever. Um, Sometimes those things used to get to me, but now they don't, because first and foremost, this is just me expressing myself. Okay, you don't like it, move
mm.
on. But if I was trying to change people's minds and get out there and try to sell stuff and so on, then they would hurt a little bit more,
Mm. Okay.
as it would show that I'm not doing well trying to get that stuff out there. So um,
Mm.
it's more of a personal criticism, of me. You're ugly, or you're stupid, or you can't draw, or whatever. It's like,
Yeah.
in there. That's water off my back now.
Yeah. And I hear you saying that part of what helps you like manage that kind of, because those kind of, while they're funny, like we can laugh about them, it hurts. Like negative criticism sucks.
Mhm.
Especially around, like, you've worked on this thing, you've gone into the studio, you've like produced this thing, you've put your heart and your soul into it, and then you put it up and somebody's like dumb. Like that.
Yeah.
That sucks. Or like, I just published a book that was very personal to me. I put it up, and it's funny. You get like some people are like, most powerful book I've ever read. Like, oh, I love this story, beautiful story. Like one reviewer was like, oh, it's a love story. I didn't even realize I was reading a love story. It's a love story. And but then one reviewer is like, somebody needs to pray for Jeff because he's clearly in a negative place. And it's been me like a week spiral of like, yeah, they don't even know who I am. They don't know what's kind of like, what's this going on? Like, so um what I'm hearing you say though is that part of what brings the security around your art is a confidence in who you are and knowing that you're, is that true?
Yeah. Yeah. And the same with if you knew you didn't need prayer, then that wouldn't affect you as much, right?
Yeah.
That,
Yeah.
but I'll tell you, the kind of criticism that hurts me the most is because I grew up in a very religious culture and was a pastor of a church. My theology was sort of towards. Um, there's two brands of. I'm gonna be very simplistic here, but there's basically two brands of Christianity. One is health, wealth, where and you see these on TV, these preachers where you should be healthy, wealthy.
Hmm.
God wants you to be rich. God doesn't want you to be sick, and all that kind of thing. Then there's another brand of Christianity, which is poverty. You need to be poor like Jesus, and and I sort of chose that route,
Hmm.
so that in my mind, money was bad,
Hmm.
uh, or necessary evil,
Hmm.
and money concerns compromised my art, and uh, polluted it even. So if there was a way I could make art and not need money, that would be ideal. But you know what? That's just not going to happen. That's just not
Yeah.
realistic. And so when I left the church, I had to basically go to the University of Life and learn about the value of money and business and selling and marketing and self-promotion and all that. And I know a ton of artists, and they may not even have a religious background. It just comes with a lot of creative people have a lot of hangups about money,
Hmm.
and that they don't like promoting themselves, they don't like to talk about their art or writing. They have a really hard time marketing and selling, and if there was a way that they didn't have to do that, that would be great, kind of thing.
Hmm.
And so I that when somebody says you're just in this for the money, that can hurt. That
Yeah.
can hurt me. It'll take me a little bit to get over that. Or, why are you selling your art? Jesus would never sell his art, kind of thing. Oh, I didn't even know Jesus was an artist. Oh
Yes,
well,
I didn't. Yeah, I didn't know he
that
lived in
kind
a
of thing.
capitalist society where he had to manage these expectations around. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
I bet a lot of your listeners struggle with the whole money deal.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, I come from the same place you do, where like, holiness is somehow like, personal justification is somehow achieved by self-denial.
Yeah.
And that like we come from the position of like, the only appropriate view of your own identity is I suck. Because the like, I suck. Uh, in some way brings glory to God, and that like, oh, I'm terrible, and that means that God is amazing.
Yeah.
I can remember in high school over and over again being told that
Yeah.
every good and perfect thing that happens that comes from you is actually from God, and all the garbage that comes from you is actually from you. So just like it's like, and I think it's weird because like the narcissists that lived amongst us in that world, they had no problem saying those things and not absorbing them. But for those of us who didn't lean like I have narcissistic tendencies. Don't get me wrong. I walked around saying I was called by God to do something for a while, but like it's a scale. But those of us that didn't lean heavy into that narcissism, we really I know I really took that to heart, and it's still hard in my art. It's still
Mm.
tough to like put a book out there and be like, I should just give this away for free.
Yeah.
Like, or like, there isn't really any value in this.
Yeah.
It is just so, um,
A hard one.
yeah. And so what is, when you do get those kind of like biting comments like that,
Mhm.
do you have a process you use to like maintain your mental health around that? Or is it just more instinctual?
I think it's more important for me to I sort of view it like keeping my well topped up. So
Mm,
I do a lot of things for my own personal health, mental health, spiritual health, whatever you want to call it. Like, you know, breathing exercises, stretching, working out, running, going for walks in the woods, meditating, reading, writing in my journal,
mm.
staying offline as much as I can. Just
That's a tough balance because you're also
that's how I
selling.
keep my yeah, that's how I
Yeah.
keep my well topped up so that
Okay.
when, if something happens, like I get some criticism, I don't have to go scrambling for a cure. I've already got a reservoir from which to draw.
Oh,
And
that's great.
but when I do get a criticism that kind of stings a little bit, I'll just like sit back and first thing I'll think is it true? No, it's not true. This is more about them than it is about me.
Mm.
I don't understand people who feel they must insult somebody. Like go online, find something they disagree with, and spend the time
Oh,
converting that into a nasty comment. Like I never do that to other people. If I disagree, I just scroll on, or
wow.
whatever. But I don't understand people who feel they must uh, try to tear people down.
Yeah, I get it. I
I don't.
understand it. I don't think I've never been that person, but I understand that person. And I know I get why someone as like humble and open as you are doesn't understand it. There's a insecurity that demands constant self-justification. So, I get those comments and I see like, oh, you are, by tearing me down, you are defining something about yourself
Yeah.
that you need to do. There's something in what I said or what I did that struck at you in a way that made you uncomfortable. And therefore, you have to deal with that uncomfortableness.
Yeah.
And like, I think what part of what I've learned from following your work is that like a reflective and healthy artist, when they feel a chord struck, they explore it like you
Mhm.
did with your waterfall. Like, it's this thing of like, oh, this challenges my worldview, but there's deep courage in being like, instead of lashing out against that, that prick in our identity,
Hmm.
leaning into it, I think
Hmm.
is where real humility comes from. I
Yeah.
think that people that need to lash out that way, it's a form of self-protection,
Right.
like identity protection.
Yeah.
Would you mind talking? So another thing I wanted to talk to you about, because I could just pick your brain on, like, dealing with assholes all day. Another thing I
Mhm.
want to talk to you about is your practice of creation. Would you mind, like, because I know a lot of fiction writers, the hardest thing is making room for the story and
Right.
actually, like, the discipline of creation. Would you
Hmm.
mind talking a little bit about, because you've made over thousands of cartoons, you've got this gorgeous artwork, you're writing these books. What is your process of creation in that?
So my process for doing a painting is quite a bit different than my process of writing.
Okay.
So my process of doing a painting is I do need to clear space.
Hmm.
And well, this is similar to my writing too. I'm going to talk about a major difference in a second. But I do need a space. I do need a nice place to go to do my
Interesting.
painting.
So, like, a
And
physical space, like you need, like,
right,
okay.
yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
And with all my materials and everything available, and oftentimes though I don't come to the paper with an idea.
Hmm.
I'm just like a lot of my paintings are spontaneous,
Interesting.
and I can do them rather pretty pretty quickly.
Hmm.
Uh, I can execute a painting pretty quickly. Um, and it's the same with writing too. I basically uh, I need to be in my place where I could physically geographical place where I could sit down and either be writing in my journal or like physically writing with a pen in my journal, my Moleskine journal, or on my keyboard, on my laptop writing. Uh, Now, the difference, though, like I said, with my paintings, I can do one in an afternoon, let's say, but um, and it's the same with a post.
Okay.
I'll sit down, I'm going to write a good post about blah, blah, blah. I'm going to sit down, I'm going to write 400, 500 words post. And I do that. And, so I'll just spill out all the words and then I'll spend twice as long editing the post,
Mm.
and saying things as best I can. How I make my books, though, many of my books are actually a conglomeration of my blog posts.
Okay.
So, for example, my book on marriage, Till Doubt Do Us Part, um, it's a series of blog posts that I put together and
Mm.
cartoons. Um, without a vision, my people prosper. That's also a
Mm.
conglomeration of blog posts.
Mm.
My other book, The Lasting Supper, Letters for Deconstruction, that's also uh, a conglomeration, a collection of blog posts.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so when people say, wow, you've written that many books, it's actually, you know what? I just wrote every day and eventually I had enough to put together and make a book out of it. It's the same with my cartoons. Like I
Yeah.
didn't sit down with Flip It Like This and draw 125 cartoons for the book. I just had to go through all the cartoons I've drawn and choose 110
Gotcha.
because 15 are never before seen.
Mm.
I did have to draw 15.
Yeah.
But that's how you do it,
Yeah. Yeah.
people. You just sit down and every day and you write anything, something,
Mm.
and eventually in a year you'll have enough to put a book together. You can
Interesting.
do that with fiction as well,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
where you just and some fiction writers I know share their each each section or whatever you want to call it.
Hmm.
They'll share it with the world in their blog, right?
Yeah.
Or you use Patreon, and you get to get a daily glimpse of the process of the writing.
Yep.
But a
Yeah.
lot of nonfiction books are written that way, or memoir
Mm,
books. Like my memoir, the questions are the answer.
mhm.
Um,
A beautiful book.
it's that was one book I had to sit down and actually write.
Okay.
But it's taken from my life. I've got all my blog posts. I got all the quotes I used. All the cartoons that are in that book were already drawn.
Hmm.
So that's just how you do it. Like my one time, my brother, I said, "Yeah, that's my new book," and he goes, "Well, you didn't really write that. That's just a bunch of blog posts." I was like, "Well, yeah, I wrote the blog posts. Like that's how writers write."
Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
sit down and write 240 pages
Yeah.
straight, right? That's just how you accomplish it, is you just write a little bit every day,
Yeah.
and eventually you'll have enough for your book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. And I love that. I love that you're taking that like daily practice and mixing it in this really nice way with your meditative practice, where they're both kind
Mm,
of coming together in this like, in a meditative. I think it lends very beautifully to the authentic self that you're presenting, which is
thanks.
very cool. Um,
Thanks.
this is a little bit of a selfish question that I thought of as you were talking. So, I left church work the first time in 2009, and then homeless and penniless had to go back, and then left again in 2014, still fairly penniless. Uh,
Hmm.
and that, like, I remember when I started deconstructing in like 2008, there were a couple voices out there. There was like you and a couple other people, but it felt very alone. It's very lonely.
Hmm.
Um, Now there's this movement around
Mm.
it. And I know I have some like old man on the front porch, like get off my lawn syndrome of like, you kids don't know how good you have it. All these podcasts. Um, how does it feel to be, kind of 30 years ahead of a curve for you?
That's really, really weird, because the word deconstruction is actually from philosophy.
Yeah, it's been around forever. Yeah.
Derrida, the French
Yeah.
philosopher, came up. He coined the word. He invented the word
Yeah.
deconstruction. And I was at a workshop seminar for a weekend studying the deconstructionists, but the whole intent of the seminar was to debunk deconstruction
Interesting.
uh, as a hermeneutic, as a
Yeah.
valid hermeneutic
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
the Bible.
Well, it's very dangerous.
Yeah. And
Can't have that around
I
here.
came away actually a convert.
Did
It
you
had
really?
the
That's
opposite
really,
effect.
that's
And that was in
hysterical.
2008. And so I started sort of using the word deconstruction to refer to my own um, questioning my beliefs, and
Hmm.
undoing everything that I built in my spiritual life and ministry and
Yeah.
all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I use the word deconstruction.
Yeah.
Actually, some people say, "You sound like a deconstructionist," like it was an insult. I took it as a compliment.
This,
And now everybody's using the word deconstruction.
I know it's all over the place.
It's
There's, yeah.
everywhere.
Yep.
And once in a while I'll say, I think I was the first one to use that. No, yeah, I think I was the first one to use that word for questioning your religious beliefs.
Yeah.
But you're right, it's now either cool or satanic, one or the other.
Yeah. And I don't, it's interesting, like inside the community, because I say I'm an old man on the lawn, but I actually love watching what's happening.
Yeah.
Um, inside the community, I've never met anybody deconstructing who thinks it's cool.
Yeah.
Nobody doing it is like, oh, this is what the cool kids do.
Yeah,
It's
no.
the worst. It's so
Yeah.
painful and it hurts and it's like, breaking things and
Yeah.
self-destructive identity. I mean, I'm still doing it and it still hurts and it's still painful. um
It's a way of life. I claim it's a way of life.
yeah, that's
It's
very true.
it's it should always be. We should always question
Yeah.
what's being fed to us. We should always question the media. We
Yeah.
should always question politicians. We should always question religious teachers. We should
Yeah.
always question those in authority and those who have power, and not just sort of consume naively everything that's given to us. That's,
Mm,
in my opinion, that's the um, the orientation of deconstruction.
mm.
It should be our lifestyle until we die. I'll always question everything.
Yeah. Well, and it
And
it makes sense to me that great art has come from there for you, because
oh,
it's that, like, like I said before, that courageous intellectual exploration, I think, that allows you to do what you've done for 17 years, to create this
mm,
great body of work that
thank you.
for that has pushed and challenged the rest of us. So yeah.
That's cool.
Um well, yeah, I think any advice you would give, I mean, you've given us an hour's worth of advice. Any final thoughts you'd give to creators who are, in this space where they want to challenge expectations and they want to push on the expectations, but they're nervous how their existing community is going to respond.
Hmm. Do you remember uh, Stephen King's when he came out with oh, what was that story of the author who's in an accident and then he's
Misery,
hmm?
misery, where they tie him to
Misery.
a bed. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And she's like, you
That
have to
that to
write.
me was his cry for help. I think
Yeah,
he felt stuck in a genre, and the author in that story who was tied to the bed, uh he the woman who was torturing him couldn't handle that he uh made the lead in his story die or something. Remember that?
yeah, 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 yeah,
And it was kind of
yeah,
like, oh, that's Stephen King's. This, he's feeling tortured because he has to keep doing these horror genre or
yeah.
whatever. Anyway, I think that's a very real sort of picture analogy of what many of us feel like when we are wanting to break out of the expectations that are placed upon us,
Mm,
and all the hopes and dreams and desires and fantasies people have for us, and we don't want to fulfill those. We want to fulfill our own.
mm,
That's really, really, really scary. It takes a lot of courage
mm,
to do that, but it's the only way you're going to be able to create anything that's authentically you. If you can't be your authentic self or express your authentic self, then how authentic is that which you're creating, really? So that to me is the big challenge for me,
mm,
is if I really do think you're right, and I really do think it's true that the more honest I am with myself and self-aware, and the more authentic I am, and it it's not so much courage, but it's almost like necessity that it has to be expressed, and it comes out in my cartoons, or it comes out in my writing, or it comes out in things I say, and people think, oh, I can't believe you said that, that was so courageous. No, I had to say it. It was almost like a necessity.
mm,
And I think that's what real creativity looks like, where your drive to be authentic and honest
mm.
creates this fire inside that just, it's like a volcano. It has to come out in your writing.
That's what I'm gonna end our conversation there. David,
Cool.
thank you so much. This was amazing. I'm gonna stop the recording and then we can chat a little bit more. But
Awesome.
yeah, thank you for
Thanks for
coming on.
having me again.
Yeah.